Hello everyone, I'm back with another video for you today, and it's time, you can probably tell from the title of the video of course, for another meta snapshot given by me, and I wanted to just give my thoughts and impressions on the meta on several decks for each faction that I think are quite good and popular, and that a lot of people are playing at the moment. I've seen other meta snapshots coming out, and I think it's always good to have a diverse sort of range of opinions on what the better decks are, so I'm going to give my thoughts once again, a bit of an updated snapshot. There'll be some decks that are the same from the previous Crimson Curse Scuffed snapshot that I did, but there will also be quite a few new ones as the meta has changed quite a bit. It's been more fleshed out over the past couple of weeks and whatnot. So let's start things off with Nilfgaard. We have, of course, Anna Henrietta. She's very popular at the moment. This list isn't the exact version that people are playing. I've got a couple of weird cards in here, including Alba Pikeman in the Bronze Core, and I'm lacking Gregoire, which is also quite a popular guy in a lot of Anna decks, but Anna is very good and probably the most popular Nilfgaard leader at the moment, I want to say. This kind of mid-rangey style of deck with a lot of locks with the Witches and just good value, bit of damage in the Bronze Core and the Golds as well. Pretty decent. You've got Shillard in there to counter Skellige, and Scoia'tel a little bit pretty damn good against those factions and even against monsters. Shillard just really kind of carries Nilfgaard in some matchups, very strong card, and of course you have a lot of tool removal inherent to Nilfgaard with Peter, Leo, etc. to shut down those tool units in a lot of decks. Pretty strong, probably the best option for Nilfgaard. Nilfgaard at the moment doesn't seem that great. It's definitely not top 2, top 3, I don't think. Maybe top 4, maybe number 4 out of 5. Hard to say, but not the strongest, but this is probably the most popular kind of deck. Obviously, you can experiment with the bronzes if you want, and the golds as always, but something like this, yeah. Should be fine. What else do we have for Nilfgaard? The probably next most common thing, although human Nilfgaard isn't that popular, I found, but there are a few people playing with the Usurper, playing with Morvran and Anna. Morvran is probably the least played, but I think it's the strongest leader to go with humans, and I know of quite a few pro ladder players who've used human decks. I think Azikov has used a human deck on Nilfgaard to kind of get quite high scores, so definitely not a bad one, and you're just playing for value, of course. Kind of an anti-meta deck. If you throw in Tibor, you can maybe counter Skellige players who are thinning themselves quite a lot, and that guy can be played for a 13-point unit. Of course, the whole point of the human deck is you're playing pretty much only human cards, and that synergizes really nicely with Dopplers. You can even play Artorias Vigo if you want to go all in on the Doppler shenanigans, and you can definitely play Emissaries and other things. In fact, this deck should probably be playing those, but I kind of cobbled it together quite quickly. But yeah, Emissaries are nice to set up Gregoire. Maybe you can throw in Milton if you want. You can definitely play Artorias with the Imperial Brigade Doppler. That's quite a nice combo as well, but do experiment a little bit with the human format. I think in Morvran it's pretty good with all the provisions, and the effect that he has isn't that bad. He's been kind of maybe overshadowed by new leaders and whatnot, but he's definitely still quite a playable one. And the other deck we have here is Shoop, which is basically unchanged since the last time I looked at it, and I mean, it's not amazing. Probably playing no Shoop is better than Shoop. However, you can make him work, and you can play it in Anna as well if you feel like it. This is kind of a bit of a janky Shoop deck for Morvran if you want to try Shoop. Definitely the weaker of the 3 decks here, I think. But you can play Shoop and Anna as well, and it's maybe not that bad. You have some finisher value there, which is pretty nice, that you might not get from the other kind of Nilfgaard lists. So those are probably the top 3 Nilfgaard lists. Honestly, Nilfgaard's a little bit lacking in terms of proper archetypes. It's just mainly mid-rangey, maybe human synergy kind of stuff going on, but apart from that, not a whole lot. But yeah, let's jump into the next faction. Gonna be Skellige, which I think is probably the strongest at the moment. They have Bran, which is very, very good, and Iced, which is also quite good. Maybe people are playing it a lot, I don't know, I haven't seen him too much recently, but he's definitely a good leader. Maybe not quite as consistently strong as Bran. Let's jump into Bran then. I'm sure you guys know and love this deck at this point. Sarcasm, but, it's, of course... Oh, we've got the bug with the cards. Always happens for these videos, whatever. Of course, you've got the Bran passive getting you a lot of points throughout the game, and that thinning, that consistency with the discarding cards every round. You can thin to 0 with this deck. Very, very cool kind of ability on the leader, and it allows you to mulligan away bad good cards earlier on in the game, so that you can kind of gain access to them later, thin through your whole deck, and guarantee all your finishers for round 3. Very, very powerful, lots of tempo plays. The thinning plays in Burner and Coral end up being bombs on their own. They're just a billion points with the Bran passive ability as well. And you're able to just thin out your deck of bad cards while also slamming points on the board and having finishers for later. So probably the best deck at the moment is Bran. Very, very, very powerful. Of course, you can fiddle around with the bronzes. Those aren't set in stone. Maybe play Veteran, maybe play other special cards and whatnot. Maybe not play Hunters. Depends on what you want to go with there. Same with the golds. You can maybe experiment a little bit with those and play some other things there. So what else have we got for Skellige? Well, you can play Iced, which is probably the next best option for Skellige, I would say. If you don't want to play Bran Shoop or something, I would say Iced is probably even better than Bran Shoop. This is kind of a slightly more refined version of the Ice that I showcased a while ago in a video. You've got Becker's in there and Disgraced Brawler for another Ice target, which is very nice. And pretty much, yeah, this is just like Bran, similar kind of story. You want to do thinning and get to your golds. You're not going to be able to thin to 0 though, which is where Bran is probably a little bit better. But you do have a bigger finisher with your Iced compared to the Bran hero effect. Iced gets you a ton of points if you pull out Knut onto Vildkarl or whatever as a finisher, or potentially, yeah, Knut onto Totem or whatever. You can even do it on Brawler or Yutta into Becker's. Not too bad. Lots of combo potential with Iced, and a very, very powerful leader when you draw well. If you are able to thin out bad cards early, if you're able to draw your good stuff and push and then get the graveyard set up, this deck is kind of unbeatable a lot of the time. Otherwise, you can struggle if you don't draw super well. That's where Bran is probably picking up the slack. But definitely a fun one. I think a lot of people have tried Iced and found it to be quite good and fun, so give it a go if you haven't already. Anyway, next, Skellige deck. Probably the least played and least powerful of these three, but Crack is not bad. I've been playing it quite a bit, and I mean, you can just play all of the good Skellige cards again, pretty much, and make any deck good. You've got the Totem, Olaf, Burner, Coral, Harold, etc. Crack has the nice bonus of being able to set up Primal Savagery pretty nicely. The Bloodthirst is also really easy to do, of course, and you can do Deathblow cards such as Gorgon, Gregoire pretty easily. So Crack, not bad at all. Probably a little bit overshadowed by the other Skellige leaders. But if this deck was in a different faction, it would probably be, up there in terms of maybe even the best deck for another faction. So Crack is an option if you're not wanting to go for the kind of typical leader approach. You can do Crack. You can also play with Wild Boar of the Sea if you want to go for a more damage everything way of playing. Then you can do that and knock out their board in a long round. This kind of value list is never going to be bad though, because you're just playing all of the good Skellige cards pretty much. So that's that. Skellige, very, very good right now. You can't really go wrong as long as you put Knut, Olaf and some damage and whatnot in, and Coral and Burner, you're probably fine. But yeah. So next up we got Northern Realms. Now I think they're a little bit lacking as a faction, kind of similar situation to Nilfgaard in terms of not very strong it seems. Probably the best deck at the moment is Meve, but I'm not even sure if that's true, and I think Spyro came up with this style of list with Ale of the Ancestors. Bit of a cheeky one for the long round potential. Synergizes very nicely with dual cards as well as with Tridem and other engines that you can protect with it. You can also shield up your dueling guys and your guys with Artificer. You have the Windhelm to push rounds. You have Anna. Basically a lot of... It's bugged again, but whatever. You have a lot of powerful engines. You're winning the long round in theory. You're able to push the opponent out a lot of the time in round 1 with those engines and then guarantee the long round 3. So pretty powerful deck, I think. I haven't played it myself really, but I've seen it being quite popular and quite successful. Probably the best Northern Realms deck if I had to guess. Next up we have Henselt, which I haven't really changed too much since I last looked at it. I think Henselt's still pretty good, but kind of lacking sometimes. Definitely the leader ability is very powerful, and you have the 17 provisions, which is a lot. Hengaith's Sword is something you could experiment with Roach, with what's he called? See here? Willem, whatever. I don't think I've got him in this list, but you can definitely play Willem with the sword, and that works as well with Roach. Pretty nice stuff. Not sure how strong this list is anymore. It's probably a bit more kind of not great, but it's an option if you don't want to play Meve. And you can definitely try some different kind of packages of cards in here. Different gold core would maybe be a good idea. Maybe play just raw value, maybe play Draug even if you're not scared of Gimpy. But this sort of kind of Row Punisher, Vernon Roach setup kind of deck is still quite good, I think, and not too bad. And the kind of final Northern Realms deck that I think is quite playable would be King Foltest. I don't think it's amazing, but it's kind of anti-meta. But it can get wins, you know, it can do okay, and it's able to compete at least with some of the other decks on this kind of snapshot. So pretty much an anti-meta thing. You want to be hitting monsters, especially with Regis, and you could play Gaunter in there, I guess, if you didn't want to go so hard on the tech for that matchup. But pretty much a bit of a combo deck, Adalia onto Commandos, put them back in the deck with Pavetta, copy them lows with Blue Stripes, pull them out later with the Foltest ability. Pretty cool idea. You could even play Draug in Foltest and it would work very well. Feel free to, yeah, experiment again. As always, these are just kind of baseline decks. You can throw cards around, and you should be experimenting. You know, play things that you think will be good for the environment you're in on ladder. That's very important. Don't just net deck straight from the tier list or whatever. But yeah, I was enjoying Foltest a lot. It was actually surprisingly okay. If you want to go less memey with Foltest, you could probably take out reinforcements. You could probably, you know, think about getting rid of Adalia, maybe not doing this kind of shenanigans with Pavetta and whatnot. Maybe go for a more solid kind of bronze core. But this worked pretty well for me. When you draw the nuts, it's very fun as well. So there's Foltest. Now moving on to monsters. Probably the second best faction. Up there, maybe even with Skellige, although Scoia'tel is looking okay as well at the moment. But what have we got? Well, Woodland is probably the most popular kind of way to play monsters at the moment. And of course you've just got the standard big dudes, Ozrael to eat them later on. You've got the Crones for value, Imrus Wrath maybe for damage. You can kind of experiment, maybe play Geralt or whatever if you want. The Bronze Core tends to be Wild Hunt Hounds for a bit of removal, the Werewolves to boost with your leader ability later on and have those points be immune, and Foglets for a little bit of thinning with Cyclops, Riders, etc. So pretty good standard value deck, just point slam, a little bit of control in the Hounds, the Wyverns and whatnot, but really it's more of a point focused deck. Just get big points on the board and eat them later on, and you guys have probably seen it at some point. Very good finisher value, probably a bit weaker to engine decks. Stuff like Meve, stuff like Scoia'tel can be a bit tricky for Woodland, but otherwise pretty good deck all around. What else do we have? We have Gurnikora, also pretty decent, probably a little bit weaker than Woodland in general, but has a better kind of long round and has the potential to bleed a bit more than Woodland does, I would say, with that kind of constant leader ability that gets you 3 points in every round. Not a bad leader, but the provisions do hurt it quite a bit as you're not able to play. You can't play Speartip and Ozrael really very easily unless you want to gimp the rest of your deck out. I've seen people like Hannah-chan, I believe, playing without Ozrael and with Speartip, so you can definitely mix and match the golds here, but there's a difficult decision to be made with Gurnikora when it comes to which golds you want to run. That's really the hard one to get right, but definitely a good deck, and you can win a lot of games with Gurnikora if you're feeling it. And last but not least, we have Arrakis Queen, which I think is also pretty damn good, maybe even better than Gurnikora Woodland. I haven't played it really enough to confirm or deny that, but there's definitely potential. You've got some insane finishers with Jermaine, Nest, and Glusty Warp, as well as with Higher Vampire, Caranthea to potentially copy him, Tainted Ale to set up Glusty, Kairon to eat stuff. You've got a lot of consuming effects for earlier on in the match when you want to be cycling through all of your kind of thinning cards, getting your Foglets and Harpy Eggs eaten and whatnot. Really fun deck. I do like Arrakis Queen a lot. The setup and the payoff is awesome when it works. You can also play sort of an artifact-focused version of this with Summoning Circle, and, you know, you already have Ale maybe, as well as Frightener. If you want to go more in on the artifacts, personally I don't really like it that much because it's very easy to bleed that version of the deck. This one is really hard to bleed and just gets a lot of nice value from every card pretty much. But yeah, I think Arrakis Queen is quite powerful. It might even be as strong as the other two leaders that I've shown here. And finally we have Scoia'tel, which I don't think are particularly bad. They're probably the third best faction if I had to rank them. They might be kind of even or higher than monsters potentially. Ithne is quite popular at the moment, probably the most popular list, at least from what I've been seeing. Dana's kind of fallen off a bit. She's quite easy to bleed and push in round 2 and then win as a result. So she's probably a bit weaker, I would say, than Ithne at the moment. Ithne with the death blows, definitely not too shabby. They can really punish monsters as well with some of the tool removal, and getting Sheldon really big and hitting a big unit with it is never going to be bad. Does get kind of a little bit countered, it's bugged again, by Shillard, which is a really nice card to hit the Ithlin buffs and the Agitator buffs off. And you can play around that a little bit maybe, but otherwise you're just focusing on removing everything pretty much, and denying engine decks any kind of value. Setting up those death blows, of course, for really strong finishers like Gregoire, Sursa for carryover, etc. You've probably seen Ithne at some point, and it's probably the strongest Scoia'tel deck. Definitely not a shabby one. Only downside is the leader is very weak, so if you're able to get a short round with it, or, you know, get resources from them earlier in the game or whatever, maybe they have to use Ithne to set up their cards earlier on, then you can definitely have a pretty good time against this leader if you have a big finisher leader, and yeah, good points from your cards. But overall, pretty good. We also have Filavandra. I would say Filavandra is probably even better than Dana, although it's probably matchup dependent, and if you get red coin with Filavandra, you're very happy. If you don't, then you're pretty damn sad. I think Pumpkin made a list of Filavandro, although this isn't the exact one, which has gained some popularity. I think Filavandra's okay. On blue coin, it's pretty bad because you're basically forced to lose on even a lot of the damn time, which is really terrible, obviously. And you can then get bled and pushed. If you're on red coin, it's a lot better, and you can definitely negotiate the round 2 after passing on 7 cards in round 1 to your liking, and you can, you know, get a lot of carryover with the dwarves, with the hand buff engines. Put all those points onto your big, scary finisher cards, which are engines themselves, effectively. You've got the Boar, you've got the Oak, you've got the Okvir Saskia. You can kind of mix and match the engines, as always, with these decks. And yeah, pretty much big carryover game plan, going for that unbeatable kind of round 3 with a ton of points generated from previous rounds. Very cool deck. I don't think it's that strong, but, you know, it's pretty coin flip dependent, and not a bad deck when it works. When you draw well and when you've got the red coin. Finally, we have Dana, which is pretty much unchanged in my eyes, anyway. And yeah, you just got the engine value, of course. Water of Broccolon, very good. With, you know, the Dana effect, you're able to buff them up, keep the Dryads alive, and the rest of the deck is, of course, enabling the Dana. Probably Pavko should be taken out. Maybe, I don't know. You can do all sorts of things with the golds here, but this is pretty standard, I think, for Dana decks. They've kind of fallen off, though, as I said, because they're pretty easy to bleed. You know what you're up against, you push them, you get the engines out of them, and then the round 3 is kind of weak for Dana, unless maybe they have the Sheldon big time buffed up with agitators and whatnot. But that's kind of a draw dependent thing. Dana's not bad, don't get me wrong, she's not bad, but the alternatives are probably a little bit better for Scoia'tel. Either way, Scoia'tel has quite a lot of pretty good tools at you know, its fingertips. It's probably not that weak of a faction, despite me not being a huge fan of Scoia'tel and not playing it very much. It's definitely not that weak. So yeah, that's pretty much the Scuffed meta snapshot. I think this one is pretty accurate. It, of course, might change within the coming days. All sorts of decks might pop up. I haven't mentioned no unit decks, which are still quite popular, at least in my experience. I've been playing against Eldane and Francesca and Woodland with no units and stuff like that, but don't really want to feature them here because they're kind of toxic, in my opinion. But yeah, these are kind of the main decks that I think are pretty playable and that I've seen a lot of recently. Let me know what you think. Am I wrong? Am I right? Have you seen anything else? Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I have been enjoying, of course, doing these snapshots. Let me know if you want more of them. I assume you probably do. But yeah, thanks for watching. Do subscribe for more videos, as always, and I'll see you next time.